Good evening and welcome to Slam the Gavel, the show that tells it all regarding family court, CPS, and parental alienation issues. I'm your host, Marianne Petrie, and I have a wonderful guest, Dr. Mark David Roseman. He is an expert and international speaker in high conflict divorce, parental alienation, and child custody. Dr. Roseman is the CEO of the Toby Center for Family Transitions, a child reunification program based in Florida, which he founded in 2010. As a mediator and consultant with family members enduring social and personal stress, Dr. Roseman has found the complementary use of different clinical and non-clinical modalities to be most effective in ameliorating these difficulties. Dr. Roseman founded Preserving Family Ties Media, LLC, an educational media and service company, and he's going to tell you more about that. He is also the publisher of Contemporary Family, a quarterly digital publication providing global services for effective parenting. And that started in 2020. And the topics addressed include parental alienation and high conflict divorce. So how are you doing this evening, Dr. Roseman?
Well, good evening. I think as so many of us, we're especially targeted parents. We're concerned about several things. Our health and welfare during these perilous times, these continuing perilous times, and the health and welfare of our children, our family, and friends, and also having great plans for 2021 in making the changes that we believe are urgent to save society.
And that needs a lot.
That's how I am.
Yes, that's how it is. And it needs to be addressed, and people need help. And you've gone to court for people, haven't you?
I have.
Mm-hmm. How often do you do that?
In the last several years, it's been 2 or 3 times a year. And importantly, it's on the as a third party providing the research that courts need to hear about child outcomes when parents separate. And so I'm hired to help address those very specific issues and educate the court, particularly in the case that's in front of them at that moment.
Mm-hmm. Do you find these judges are curious about parental alienation? Are they aware of it?
Well, with respect to parental alienation, there has been an evolution of its recognition. It's not fast enough, and it is still debated, unfortunately, within the courts. And what I like to do is reference parental alienation secondarily and point out what children need and what apparently is not being provided to children, and help them look at ways to make it happen. Clearly, when a parent obstructs the access to a child by the other parent, that is alienating behaviors, and it is criminal. It is criminal to stop the relationship between a parent and a child, and it is criminal further and worse when you destroy a child's mental health because of the brainwashing that ensues to achieve what typically it is the custodial parent wants.
And you probably see that a lot in the courtroom. I'm sure that's like a common thing. People are pulling on each other.
It is, and the tragedy is that although it is the courts that hear these cases that oftentimes return to court, not only with protracted litigation, but follow up to decisions that had been made that are really not in the favor of the child anyway. And we can talk more about that, Mary Ann.
Sure.
But the problem is that uh, the courts are still dealing with litigation, and it's like a prize fight. As they say proverbially, may the best man win, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure with the with more of the females in the WWA, maybe they say may the best, you know, win. But but that is the tragedy. As someone pointed out, in fact, a very good friend of mine, Danica Field, who founded Kids Need Both in Central Florida. But we were talking about 5-6 years ago. She said, Mark, did you realize that the goal of family court is contrary to the role of dependency court? And yes, of course. She said, but get this, that the role of dependency court, which is referenced in Florida, and sometimes, as in Ohio, where I've done some work, it's called juvenile court. But wherever the court will listen to the needs of children in temporary foster care, whatever the name of that court may be, their goal is antithetic to what family court is. Family court is like the Roman Colosseum, right?
Right.
It's horrific. There's bloodletting, there's lies, there's manipulation by all parties, and the judges, frequently are in cahoots with attorneys because of brotherhood and who knows what obligation. I'm not saying this as an overall criticism, but it has been proven over time that there is just not a commitment by a number of judges, and that number of judges overwhelms and overshadows the good that could come out of such a Roman Colosseum type of atmosphere. But if you consider as I mentioned, the dependency court or the juvenile court, or other ilk name for that court where children are being reunited from temporary foster care. The goal of that court is to reunite that child with no stopping, right? Essentially, the goal is to reunite. That's what the judge wants to see. That's what the court tries to do. That's what the GALs on cases and case managers are seeking to do, is to bring these children reunified with their biological parents. In family court, I'm sorry, but that is not the same mission. And we need to slam the gavel.
Yes, we do. Yes. Yeah, they're getting away with far too much. These some of these GALs, I know there's some good ones out there, and for the most part, there's a lot of bad ones out there. But they are really not working towards, and I hate to use a phrase, the best interest of the child. They're not working towards looking at the whole situation and both parents and really reading the case.
Well, it's regardless, I think, of whether they've read the case or not, their context is their own frame of mind as an attorney that's appointed by the court. That generally is a favor. Unless you're a GAL connected with an agency that is seeking to reunite children in foster care with their biological parents, those GALs have a definite role which they embrace. But in family court, a GAL is not necessarily trained in children's best interests. What they are trained to do is to litigate. There are family attorneys who have been given an opportunity to serve as a GAL. It's another revenue stream for them. And uh, I can't say that such GALs do not care, but I will tell you that it's not evident that many do, and it's not evident that they are skilled
Mm-hmm.
helping to make the decision. Look, in Connecticut, where I'm from originally, and where I had my own divorce experience over 20 years ago, which brought me into the field, there were two attorneys that served as additions to the attorneys who may be hired to represent one or both parties.
Mm-hmm.
And those third parties are called either the guardian ad litem or the attorney for the minor children. Now, the AMC, the attorney for the minor child or the minor children, is really the mouthpiece for the children, particularly for minor children. And their role is to say what they believe is what the children feel and would say if they had an appearance in the court. Now, the guardian ad litem, their role is different. And their role is to recommend to the court what the court should consider, what the court should decide, but not always why. But that's their role, is to act as a consult, if you would, to the judge. So why should private parties in family court have to pay such a position?
Mm-hmm.
Especially when you have GALs who in family court are simply attorneys who have a favor bestowed upon them or are appointed for different reasons. Much of the time, sometimes they're solicited by parents who have come to court and feel it would be helpful to have a third party. Again, I'm very critical when there's no uniformity. And I think until there is uniformity, we must all be critical and we must all call what should be done and demand accountability.
Mm-hmm.
And that only comes around when there is a change in the court system.
Mm-hmm. So I don't know if family court will ever change because Congress installed it back in the 60s without anyone really voting on it. Like the public didn't even vote on it on family court. It just arrived. And now we can't get rid of it because of all these incentives that they're incurring.
Well, I think it's extremely important for political leadership, legislative leadership, to do a fact find and begin to look at the research on child outcomes and have a fact finding commission to look at ways to improve child outcomes. And quite directly, when you have so many children who are living in single parent households, nearly 40% of children in public school do live in single parent households, and you have on average only 70% or less of high school students graduating college. And when you have nearly 40% of public school children who have been diagnosed or prescribed for ADD and ADHD, we're not connecting the dots.
Mm-mm.
So have a pure interest in refocusing the role of family court so we can improve those outcomes. Children fare better when both parents, loving parents, are involved in their children's lives. And so I believe that there needs to be a commission or some fact-finding study to look at how can family courts, number one, improve child outcomes. Number two, what can be implemented in the short as well as the long term to make changes to begin to impact or to positively change the role. And I think over time, it would be easier than demanding there be a complete overhaul of the family court system. There needs first to be an acknowledgement that this system is failing over 30% of families. It is directly contributing to uh, the mental health challenges that so many kids have. It leads to bullying, by the way.
Mhm.
It leads to suicide. It leads to juvenile crime. It leads to drug and alcohol abuse. Clearly, the evidence has presented itself. It is time. We've done enough in the last year to see the frailties of our system, to look at the horrific challenges to the democratic system, and to look at the failures uh, in our society. And with commitments to regroup, to readdress, to organize, to look towards the humanity of society, we must and cannot avoid looking at the humanity that is missing in the family court system.
Do you think, um, with these incentives, these judges don't care? They don't care about what happens with the child, just give it to the parent who's lying the best.
The uh, the studies that I have read, both quantitative and qualitative, have shown that judges in family court do not want to be there. They do not want to be there.
Hmm.
If that's true, do you want someone deciding your fate and that of your children and that of your family up to 6 generations? Because every court decision in family court with regard to custody arrangements, the disenfranchisement of a child's rights to two parents, the separation and the obstruction of a loving parent that has had a loving history with their children, but has been fictionally recharacterized and pushed away.
Mhm.
Decision based on these perceptions and actions will impact a family negatively or positively for the next 6 generations. It's 150 years.
Mm.
That is research. And until a judge understands that they have the control of determining not only the immediate acts, certainly the immediate access a child has to parents, but the immediate needs of a child and the parents who are coming through a very difficult emotional time for themselves. I understand that. But when that judge will accept that responsibility, then they will make better decisions and they will help the families even at the most difficult of times, which divorce, high conflict, child custody are the most difficult times. When that judge will acknowledge that, then they will commit themselves to begin to consider better ways of resolving the issues before them instead of perhaps patronizing one of the attorneys or dismissing their own involvement in a particular court. And I know this sounds very, very strong, and I'm a very bitter old man now, but I was a very bitter young man, 48, when I was divorced, you see. So it's really critical that bitterness not linger. People's lives are completely changed based on the decisions of the court, meaning the judge.
And that can affect you for the rest of your life. As you said, even my life, it's not the same after family court, after what they put not just myself through, but my children through. And, I've bought every transcript, and you read these transcripts of when they had the kids sequestered and what they were saying. And they were telling the judge they wanted to go back 50-50, as we had been for years before the third party entered the picture. And the judge didn't care. He was busy doing the opposing attorney favors. And I think this is happening a lot in these courtrooms where these judges are meeting with these lawyers in the clubs. They're talking about the case, that's going to happen the next day, and they've decided the outcome already.
An oxymoron is family court, right? Family? Where is family when you leave the courtroom? Where is family in the process? Now, I know that many judges do have a difficult time and depend upon third parties to provide information so that they can make better decisions. And I really applaud those judges who do this and who do care, at least are doing their job. The problem is, I don't want a judge sitting there who really doesn't want to be in family court. And a problem in most states, I can't give you figures, but in most states, there is a tendency to rotate judges from family to criminal to juvenile to dependency, to civil. I mean, this is outrageous.
Mhm.
Outrageous. That should be done for a new judge, get their feet wet, to be mentored by another judge. They should not have the authority in a courtroom. They should be there to learn. And I think that's something I never addressed in writing or speaking, but judges should enter a mentorship program.
Mhm.
I'm not aware at this time of any, but I do believe that, Marianne, we have to put family back into family court. And I think family and juvenile or dependency, however it may be referred to, and not all states reference family court, although they do those cases, they call it, you know, matrimonial court or some other derivation. Point is that anything dealing with family issues or children, other than juvenile crime, should be in the same court, and there should be an umbrella for what we call today family court and dependency or juvenile, whatever. They should be under the same jurisdiction, and the judges should be there for life. This is a commitment. So their training, their professional training, must also require continuing education in the fields of family therapy, family studies, child psychology, as well as social science and social work. They need to understand the whole gestalt of a family, especially when it goes through a crisis, because their job is to resolve it. And you don't resolve it based on points of law, although you need a legal structure. I'm not dismissing that, but the legal structure without the background and the education to help families is really critical. And third parties, as a discussion, Marianne, there are so many that do not have any understanding of parental alienation. They don't know factors. They don't, they dismiss it. They don't want to. A lot of them, if they feel that they can do a forensic evaluation. They really don't have that experience. They need to have training and the authority in order to do it. You can't have someone who's networked with the court for years that they'll do anything for a buck. You know, there's so much abuse within this, as the movie title is, Divorce Corp.
Mhm. I think a lot of people should watch that. um, it's just really a shame. I mean, going through a divorce is stressful. You don't want to see your kids go through a divorce. You don't want to go through a divorce. It affects so many people around you, especially your children, and you don't want to see them suffer. But they shouldn't have to. We co-parented very well as 50-50 until the third party entered the picture. Then it just went to pieces. And then you get hauled into the family courtroom and everything's taken away from you. And not, not just your children, but, your livelihood.
We suffer greatly in many ways when we are denied access to our children, when we are vilified in the court, when we are demonized, when there are allegations that are false, when the courts, look at the uh, with great disdain, not fairness, but they listen to allegations, they respond emotionally themselves, and they castigate, they punish, they accuse the other party. And it's very difficult. And then you get into court systems where there are cookie cutter approaches to trying to understand a family, by having evaluations on state of mind and whether you're looking for narcissism or
Mhm.
self-esteem issues. You have to look, I believe, at behavior. What is each parent, how are they functioning? What is happening within them? How do they feel about themselves? Anybody who uh, is identified as being a narcissistic, which is a very common term that is, accused, that is used to describe the custodial parent in cases where children are being brainwashed. I say get away from the labels, because in the court system now, if you want to make a difference for your child, identify the behaviors that are appearing, and you want to stop those behaviors. And that's what the points should be when someone is in court. Draw that to the attention of the judge and make it clear that this is not healthy. And you were kind to reference my book. I'll hold it here, Preserving Family Ties, which, by the way, much of it is free on Google Books. But if anyone is interested in an ebook, they're like $4. You can get them on Westbow Press or Amazon or Barnes and Noble. I've been fortunate to have my book being sold in Barnes and Nobles. But the important thing about the book is that, for me, my goal was to provide a source of documented research that people can use in the court.
Mhm.
And so if you look at your own case, and as you read the book, and it's not written as a scientific journal needing a dictionary, to translate. It's written in layman's terms, but the research is very clear. And there's also a framework of what the divorce experience has been in this country, as well as the history of marriage. But focuses on the research. You need to bring research into the court. If you don't, then you're allowing the judges to make decisions based on their emotional feelings. They decide the law. They don't necessarily use the law. And it's the and attorneys who I know have told me this, not just Roseman, angry Roseman speaking. It breaks my heart, Marianne, because I work with the courts in the state of Florida. I started an agency called the Toby Center, named for my mother, 10 years ago, and we provide child reunification services and supervised visitation and family therapy. And that was my goal when coming to Florida, because Florida was really among the more progressive states. They required mediation before parents split, and they understood that high conflict divorce required more help. So uh, they accepted a position called a parent coordinator to act as another third party, as you were referring to third parties. The court is a major third party, but they have tools. One of the tools at great expense for a family is a parent coordinator. And they work similar to a mediator, but they can slap you on the head, figuratively speaking, and say, look, I don't like that. That's not, you think that's best for your kid? No, you're crazy. You really do not understand, and that's unacceptable. And you have better think about it. So a parent coordinator has more latitude than a mediator who's really trying to facilitate common understandings, common agreements, common compromises. But if you don't go to the court with information and ammunition, which is in the form of research, at least referencing the research, then you're dependent upon, as I said, judges and attorneys too, arguing from an emotional standpoint. You can't argue from an emotional standpoint, sadly. I feel that you need to argue logically. And that's why I would ask your listeners to think about what it is that they have argued in the court or have heard argued in the court or feel that they want to argue in the court. Nobody's case is all that different from anybody else's fundamentally. With details, certainly. Fundamentally, no. Because we believe our kids have been brainwashed, they've been sabotaged, they are being affected and impacted emotionally and mentally. But you have to identify to the court what is happening. Specifically, what are the signs? What does the court need to know? Therefore, the court can decide, what they can do. They're a very digital. Well, got to help me out here. It's simply their thinking. It's either yes or no, right or wrong.
Mhm.
It's not based on a broader understanding of human nature, and they're not into that. They want to look, was law broken or was it not?
Mhm.
And to show any decision that's made by law is going to impact my family, and therefore you need to know what your decision is going to do and how you can improve it. That's the only way, I believe, that more of decisions in courts will be made more reasonably and appropriately.
Yeah, I agree, Dr. Roseman. When you have been in court, can you spot a narcissist very quickly? Do you think the judge can spot the narcissist really quickly?
I don't think we should give judges the expectation that they are capable of doing anything except wanting to be out of that case, wanting to be out of that court. I do think that when cases continue to come back to court, whoever the parent is that's bringing motions and the same motions or compounded motions, that judge is going to get ticked off. And you, as a parent coming back to court, is likely to antagonize that judge. But that's because that judge didn't do their job. And judges react emotionally. And they, I am sure, as individuals, I would like to think that that they will be aware of the motivations that one or the other party has in the courtroom. But I would not put much credence or expectation that a judge is going to know who is acting out of their own selfishness, who is, creating falsehoods or um, fabricating stories, making complaints. They respond to keywords. And, if you bring up domestic violence, judges' eyes light up. And, in with respect to domestic violence, they act generally to immediately do what they can to protect the party claiming domestic violence, particularly if it's female. And so there are certain terms that they respond to, and they are jaded by. And I believe that they have a difficult time knowing what is truth. The best judge I ever witnessed was in a movie, My Cousin Vinny, and I recommend everybody watch that, And by the way, you'll enjoy it. You will enjoy it, right? I saw your smile.
I've probably seen that movie.
The judge who looks how law works, but then realizes how truth can come from testimony and from legal argument. And judges who are not open to that, but are really allowing themselves to rule by emotion or by connection, it's not permitting any fair decision-making in the court.
Mm-hmm. It just seems there's too many hands in the pot. You've got psychologists, and you've got several psychologists, and then you've got the guardian ad litems and the attorneys, and it's just a big mess in there.
It is. It is, and it's an expensive one. And those that go pro se, over 30%, close to 40% of litigants are now pro se. And I'm talking pre-pandemic, statistics. And you go to court pro se, you're entering a minefield. And I know that as parents who have studied the research, who have made copious notes of their children's behavior, of the other parents' behavior, feel very well prepared. But you have to be able to present it in a way that is not emotional, but is factual. Any advice that I had been given many years ago, and which I've given over the years, is that if you're going to court, you have to conduct yourself as an attorney. Mm-hmm. And that means being dispassionate, being logical, and being focused. And if you're not, you're facing a very difficult time. And it is a minefield. And I wish that more people would be able to not only afford attorneys. And by the way, you can reach out to attorneys and you can make all kinds of deals and offers to them. Remember, I want to add, Marianne, that anytime you go to court, I need each person to realize if you have an attorney, you are in control, not them. You do not give up your control to the attorney. You tell the attorney what your goal is and ask them, is it doable? How? What is your approach? Well, what would you do if this happens? And what would you do if that happens? And what do you see as the path that you would want to set? And by the way, no, I don't have the $15,000 to give you right now. Are you agreeable to accepting a monthly payment of $50? Or can I give you, $1,000 now and $1,000 a month? You have to come up with ways, because it is so expensive. And attorneys, I'm not begrudging them. they put a lot of time in the cases, and they know how to bill as well, which I also know from other attorneys, not just being on the billing end, but what they've revealed. So, but you are in the driver's seat. And if you lose control, not that you know anything about the court or the process, but if you lose control, you're cooked. You're
Mhm.
cooked.
I don't know. I mean, I enjoyed being pro se. I just behaved like they did. And I even talked to the judge like they did, like we had gone to a club the night before and talked about the case. I felt I did very well. I did what my children wanted. Even when I had an attorney, the attorney called me into his office and said, you know, the kids just want to be with you. And I said, well, they told me they want to go back to 50-50. So he said, oh, okay, then we'll do that. So like you said, you are in the driver's seat, you're paying them, and they should do what you're asking, provided it's reasonable. And but there was really no chance for my case, being that the opposing attorney was in collusion with the judge. So I could have walked in there with a Hollywood team of attorneys and still would have lost.
That's and that's the sad thing. That's why I say that we all need to advocate for changes in family court. We need to professionalize it. You don't have to demean it, but it has gotten away for 30 years. It's gotten away from its role. And that's over the 30 years, that's true because the demands in the family court have increased. And so the need for judges has increased. And the need to expedite cases has increased. And therefore, so has been the tragic, unsatisfying and unfair and illogical and completely wrong decision making by many judges historically. There's a new book that's been written by Dr. Demosthenes Larandos and Dr. William Burnett, and that's called Parental Alienation, Science and Law. And it's a large book. It's a new book which looks at case studies in this country, particularly where parental alienation has been identified. In more than 3,000 cases nationally, parental alienation was identified, it was mentioned, and over 1,500 provide the data of successful litigation of parental alienation. That all comes from their research of the legal archives known as LexisNexis. And that I would recommend that every attorney who really wants to improve their representation get a copy of that text. I reviewed it, in fact, for the American Journal of Family Therapy. It'll be in this next issue. But that is the signature compendium for attorneys who are concerned about representation of parental alienation in family courts. And it's really critical that that information be referenced and used in every court case, because any judge who says, or any attorney in court who denies there is no parental alienation, we know is full of it. We also know that they don't belong in family court. We also know that if they don't have any other questions that relate to different schema that a child expresses or acts or demonstrates in other ways of alienating behaviors, then that judge and that attorney does not belong in the courtroom. The role of the courts, the mission of the courts needs to be further clarified and held accountable. And we can only advocate to make that happen. It's really critical. In my book, I discuss advocacy. And may I read a definition I had written
Sure.
since I can't remember it?
That's okay. I'm like that too.
Um, Advocacy is the proactive effort to change by public demonstrations, conferences, personal conversations with political leadership, and sharing of information to those gatekeepers, to agents of public policy change. In order for change to occur, you have to have messages that are focused and directed to all those that can impact the decisions and the uh, considerations for those changes. So the gatekeepers, like legislative aides, judicial assistants in the court that work with each judge, your legislature has committees. You must identify who of those in your state legislature sit on the judicial committees, on other commissions that are addressing the nature of family legislation or family statutes. And if there isn't one, you need to contact your legislator and say, there needs to be. And this is why. And it's not just about your case, because to them, it's a sorry case, but it means nothing. What do the constituents feel? That's why rallies are important, press conferences are important. And it's not just videos on Facebook or postings in social media. You need to be in the community. Now, this is a pandemic, it's a horrific time, but you can schedule programs on Zoom and other similar platforms. And everyone needs to plan right now. I worked in Washington for many years for the Children's Rights Council, and I was fortunate in my life to work with the man who is referenced by Dr. Richard Sauber as the king of joint custody. The man brought joint custody to nearly 30 states through testimony and research. And I worked with him over many years. That was David Levy. And David Levy was my mentor in this. And he always said, among many things, but if you want to change, you have to make it happen. Mm-hmm. And so figure out what in your community will allow you to become a community voice and then to take community action. And for everybody, there are similarities and there are also differences, but you must.
And I think a lot of people are, they don't know what to do. They're so shell-shocked when they walk out of family court, and some people just throw their hands up in the air and just walk away because they're so beaten down from family court that there's no fight left in them.
That's, Marianne, that is so true. And I remember, 23 years ago, the frustrations that I had in the court were so debilitating to me that I only saw one way out, and that was death. But when with the help of my sister, she was in grad school at the time, and she said, why don't you sit back? Why don't you think of ways that you can make a difference? And why don't you go back to school? Why don't you look for pathways? And so I did. So people need a break from the court, but a reorientation. And if you reorient yourself and you begin to make choices for yourself and take steps into achieving certain goals that you may have, that's empowering. And so to go from a courtroom where you had no power, you were victimized, and to take steps now, which are proactive, which you're in control of, you are deciding, and you are making the initiatives and making the efforts. That is so life sustaining. That is rejuvenating. I will tell you from not only my experience, but the support groups that I was involved in during my divorce. It was, and by the way, I fought in court for 5 years. So I was no stranger to the courthouse and the court clerks. This was in New Haven, Connecticut. They recognized me because I come in pretty often. I looked in my folders. I began doing research in the library, and I just felt more a part, more accepted, my presence. But my life changed when I became more proactive. And I would like to share with you, Marianne, that I uh, I I have 3 steps that's not rocket science, but very helpful to anybody looking to deal with trauma and wanting to make changes. And that is acknowledgement, recognition, and support. And we have to acknowledge where we are now, what our life looks like now, what are we feeling now, and recognize that now is momentary, although so much has led to this current state of mind, as well as our financial state, our social state, the lack of family, the family support, the lack of our access to our children for many. I get it. But we have to acknowledge all of this. Then we have to move to another step called recognition. And that says, I can feel sorry for myself and it's legitimate. But while I do feel sorry for myself, don't deny it. Feel it and say, okay, I'm in a real morass. I'm in a real cavern. I'm stuck. But I don't want to be here. This is where I'd like to be. Well, that's what I'd like to do. This is what I'd like to earn. This is what I'd like to become. If you begin to identify objectives that you would like in your life, you deserve it. You deserve it. You are given life. In Hebrew, in English, we say choose life. No matter how we are feeling, we have been blessed. Let's use that blessing, even though the life as we feel now sucks. Let's choose life. Let's try to magnify it. And so let's recognize where we would like to go, what we would like to do, what we'd like to become, what skills we need, what income levels we want, how we're going to sustain ourselves, and then prepare a roadmap in achieving those goals. And then thirdly, realize, there are a lot of buckets of help, and support is critical. So make a list. Who are those people that know the answers to your questions about how to create that roadmap to achieving certain objectives? And talk to them, reach out to them. You can use social media, you can use the telephone, you can attend groups, perhaps online. At this moment, hopefully we'll have vaccines that will give us more, healthy security and safety. But you need support. So Marion, I created a company called David Roseman and Associates as part of a multimedia organization of education, support groups, and consulting and resources for people who are suffering from parental alienation, who are looking to change their life. And we now are introducing this month new modular approaches in support groups. Support groups are great in general, absolutely. Misery loves company. Been there, done that for a long time. But if you want to get to your path that you've recognized where you want to be, what you want to achieve, where you want to go, what you want uh, as a new addition, then you need support. And so we've designed for the targeted parent several levels of dealing with the shell shock of alienating and poor decision making in the courts to those of self-care and new directions and choice making.
Mhm.
And I would ask people, to please take a look at, Mark David Roseman and Associates, and if you're a targeted parent, particularly, and see what option there is for you. Because I think a structured approach in our life is extremely important and helpful. It's not just pedantic. These are peer facilitated, but organized by trained and experienced um, support group coordinators. But we all need to go through the acknowledgement, recognition, and support, and that's something I really urge everyone, Marianne.
I think that sounds like an excellent program because some people, they're going through the court process or they're coming out of the court process and they've got post-traumatic stress disorder and they're spinning their wheels with, even their own counselors or whatever. And they're not progressing, like you said. You've got to progress. And because I too was feeling suicidal because it was just a very dark period. But then I thought to myself, the ex wants me dead. So to tick him off, I'm going to stay alive. So I stayed busy, found things to do, whatever. Just continuously stayed busy. And then, for years, something said you better write a book because people kept saying, what happened? What happened to your kids? What happened to your job? And so I thought, well, I think it's time to write the book. But
And we are so rewarded because you did.
oh, thank you. I didn't want to write the book. I really didn't want to dredge all that up because I was going through transcripts. And it's like, I don't want to do this. It was just very, but I also used the book as a learning tool because it's only 160 pages long because my publisher said, you want to be able to attract people to help them because you went through this. And I've quoted psychologists and sociologists and even, an attorney. And I just put together, how to act as a pro se, how to, talk to attorneys and progress, just from that. And as far as dealing with your kids, they are on their path of being brainwashed. So I've got 2 of them that won't speak to me, but that may change in the future, but I'm going to stay busy and progress, and the door's always open.
And what you've just said, Marianne, is really critical, and your listeners need to understand that what is in our life now is in our life now. Nothing is in concrete, it's in stone. No, that's not how life is. Life is fluid. It's also said in Yiddish that the man makes plans and God laughs. So not everything happens in the time that we would like it. Now, others say that things happen for a reason and things happen at the time they're supposed to happen. So although sometimes adages are helpful in understanding certain things about our lives, I would say this: remain, as you've said, Marianne, remain hopeful, leave doors open, and live your life. Live your life in ways that are going to attract positive people and going to attract positive things. You'll have to be content, and that's a process, because remember that recognition phase that I spoke of? You need to be clear although you don't have to have everything listed for yourself, but you need to be clear about some of the things that you want for yourself now, short term and long term. You need to begin putting that list together. We have thought about these things. I have no doubt. I wish it wasn't this way, we say, of course. And what would we wish for? That it wasn't this way, so what should it be? Begin with that and continue to build on that. And as you do, you're going to find that you are creating a roadmap for you. 25 years ago, I was a financial advisor. I became a PhD in family studies and high conflict divorce and therapy. You never know. You never know what happens with respect to your life and what your potential is. And think of it that way. Life changes will help you, God willing, uncover new potential, other opportunities. We can't control everything that we would like, but we don't have to give up on those things either. So keeping that door open, send letters to your children, many things you can do to a child who is not seeing you, doesn't want to see you, so they say, may not have the ability to get through the gatekeeper. You can in time.
Mm-hmm. That's true. Everything is in God's timing. We don't have any control over that. So that's why I just stay busy, and I was wondering, is there any advice or anything you would like to add?
Yeah. When I got divorced and when I was thinking about who I am, there are three questions. Who am I? Where am I going? And how will I get there? And I began thinking about the things that affected me emotionally. What made me happy, what made me sad, what I enjoyed, what I didn't like. I was fortunate because I had, at that time, my own loving parents who supported me, gave me just great recognition and acknowledgement, and believed in me and encouraged me. But they were also very funny people. And so I did stand-up comedy for 3 years. And I will tell you that that was a lifesaver for me. I found jazz, which I've always enjoyed, but jazz particularly was a big, big help. That was the music I wanted to listen to, and stand-up comedy. And I found that those were several things that gave me intense pleasure. And so I would ask each of you in this new year, not only keep busy, as you said, Marianne, which is important, but also as you are keeping busy, find where you're gravitating, find what's attracting you, what's pulling you outside of the court process, outside of the thoughts of your children. We can have negative thoughts, and we often do. And it's okay. But when they're on our shoulders, we say, you know what? Stay there. Or I'll talk to you another time. Just acknowledge them. That's it. Find what gives you, what grounds you, what you enjoy, what may test you in terms of your creativity. You may return to certain avocations you had as a teenager or as a young adult or as a kid. But find something, writing, reading, listening, drawing, different outlets. What is the outlet that you had at one time that you enjoyed? Come back to it.
That's excellent advice, and I kind of did that too. I was a writer a long time ago, and then I went back and wrote this book, and I used to ride horses. And I just, at this point, at my age, I just ride a schooled horse. So I don't own one. But all we do is just walk around or trot around. It's helpful for anxiety, and horses are a good outlet.
Yes. And you're writing now?
Here, well, just once a week. I believe it or not, I got sick with COVID, so I haven't.
Oh my.
I know. But yeah, it's gonna take me a while. I probably will wait another month because I'm just run down.
Well, I hope you heal more quickly than you think, and visualize, the horse riding that you want to do. And visualization is great. When I first divorced, and I had my own insurance agency, this is almost 25 years ago, I was so depressed, and I was fighting in court, and I just felt awful. And there was before I went into, grad school, I consulted a therapist who was in my building, and she was a much older woman, very experienced, and she said, um, she's in her 70s, and she said, Mark, do you ever take a moment to visualize where you would prefer to be? And I said, no. Well, she closed the lights, she sat me back, she said, I want you to think. And I'm going to give you a journey. And it was incredible. It was so relaxing, and it was so helpful because I found that I was going into a different environment that I wouldn't have conceived of. I wasn't ready to, certainly. I was overwhelmed with all these negative thoughts on my shoulders. And so visualization is very important. Meditation, and
Mhm.
if you listen to music, dim the lights, and groove, baby, just groove.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, just staying positive as much as you can, and
Yes,
when those negative thoughts enter your head, you banish them. You've got to banish them. As painful as they are, you have to still keep moving.
you do, you do. And with music, it's easier for me. I found it very easy to do that. Um, but I needed that quite often. So find. I would ask your listeners to make suggestions to what has been helping them, or what has helped them, or what they may like to try. You
Mhm.
know, New Year's resolutions. You believe in it. You don't believe in it. It's the beginning of the year. So I would say, forget about what you believe in, what you don't believe in. Write down on a piece of paper one thing that you want to do for yourself that is new, that you want to
Mhm.
try, that is new. And it could be baking in the kitchen, could be trying another food, getting a takeout somewhere, and let Marianne know. Marianne, you should invite people, I think, to share their ideas and begin to post them. I think that would be really lovely.
I think so too. I think so too. I'd like to have you back on in a couple months if you'd like to come back on Slam the Gavel.
I would be delighted. I would be honored.
Oh, that's great. So, like, okay,
Thank you.
again, how can people reach you?
Thank you. The best way would be to email me, and they can email me at my name, Mark period Roseman, Mark Roseman with a dot in between my first and last name at markdavidroseman.com. They can visit uh, my website, markdavidroseman.com, and they can find a form. They can email me. Uh, and those would be the better ways, most expedient ways to reach me. And I would welcome anybody's inquiry or comment or recommendation. Um, and I do hope And the first person that contacts me will get a free book.
Well, that's great. And you're doing wonderful work with the Toby Center. And
Thank you. Thank you.
mhm.
Yes. May I say something briefly about that?
Sure, sure.
Well, thank you. I created an agency 10 years ago in Florida called the Toby Center for Family Transitions. And I may have said earlier that we are connected with 6 court systems in Florida. We provide child reunification therapy and supervised visitation to families in South Florida and Central Florida. We're looking to expand to Northern Florida. We are in Connecticut now and Ohio. If your community has need for working with an agency to provide these services where there is no agency, contact me. We're always looking increasingly to expand our services, our role. It's a nonprofit agency, and we've been fortunate to finally get funding to pay for parents in South Florida who lost incomes, did not have the money to see their children through these court-ordered services. We have been able to do that for the last 3 months without charge to South Florida families. So I'm so grateful for that. But that money's run out.
Ah,
Yeah, but um, but um, but if people have ideas and they want to share them with me, Marianne, I'm really happy to you know to comment, and I welcome that.
well, that's great. You're doing great work, and I
Thank you,
appreciate you.
thank you very
I-
much. And you, because you have done the same thing. You have taken a lemon and made lemonade. A little more sugar would be great.
yes, yes.
COVID, recovery complete, and more horseback riding. That's the sugar.
Right. Well, that's what my counselor said. She said she wants me on the horse and getting rid of the anxiety.
Yeah, yeah. Many years ago, I taught college at University of Connecticut. Pardon me, University of New Haven. Excuse me. And I was on a. I'm not a veteran, but I was invited to serve on the Veterans Council and help with new programs with veterans, which was really an honor for me. And we located um, a, uh, a stable that had been doing some work with writing therapy with autistic children. And I and another colleague who was a professor and a veteran himself reached out and met with that stable to see if they would consider working with veterans who have PTSD, and which can make it available to students who are coming back from the Iraq War, who are working who are coming back to school. There was no transition for the soldier. If you know a soldier, that's come out of the combat theater, they have no downtime. They have no transition.
Mm-mm.
It's terrible how this government treats our soldiers. I believe there needs to be much more assistance for them. At least that's what I had learned 11 years ago and following communications. Anyway, horseback riding, make that on your recognition list.
Definitely, definitely. Well, Slam the Gavel is a podcast to help the public understand what really goes on in the family courtrooms that in turn perpetuate parental alienation. I am your host, Marianne Petrie, author of Dismantling Family Court Corruption and Cry Out for Justice, Poems of Truth. Please join us again, and we will have Dr. Roseman on in the future. And thank you for listening.
Thank you, everybody.